2311 Racing continues to own Kansas Speedway. 3 wins the past 4 races, 3 wins for the 45 car the past 4 races, 3 wins from 3 different drivers, Kurt Busch, Bubba Wallace, and tonight it was Tyler Reddick locking himself into the round of 12. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove, post-Kansas race recap edition, the second race of the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs, this middle race in the 3-race round of 16. So much to get to tonight. We'll talk about the race winner, that thrilling overtime finish, some non-playoff drivers who jumped out at me tonight. We'll look at the playoff grid heading into Bristol, the final race of this first round. We'll put this race on the Groovy Gauge in a moment, but I want to start with my championship pick, Martin Truex Jr. You can't let this happen to me 2 years in a row. 1 year ago, right before last year's playoffs began, I went out on a limb. I picked Tyler Reddick to win the 2022 Series Championship. He flamed out in the round of 16. Okay, I knew that was a bold pick. So this year, just a couple weeks ago, I made sure to pick a heavy favorite. Anything can happen at Phoenix, but Martin Truex Jr., the regular season champion, he's at least a lock for the round of 8, right? Probably the championship 4. 2 races into the round of 16, and MTJ is 7 points below the cut line. Last week at Darlington was on them. They had issues on Saturday, then on Sunday, the car wasn't right. Martin Truex Jr. admitted this week that they had broken suspension pretty much all day long, something he should have felt out, the team should have thought to replace before the race. Last week was on them, more or less. They ran outside the top 10, they struggled. But today, and I hate when racers chalk everything up to bad luck, but today truly was just that. Terrible, awful misfortune. They rolled off pit road, must have punctured their right rear tire at some point along the way. 3 laps in, after fading outside the top 10, Truex spins, backs into the outside wall, completely tears up the rear end of that car. They were towed to the garage. They were out. Martin Truex Jr. finishes dead last today after qualifying 3rd at a track Toyota recently at least has dominated at. He was out before this race ever even got going. All because of a little puncture on his right rear tire. Crew Chief James Small shared this photo after Goodyear assessed that, yes, it was in fact a puncture that caused his tire to go down. That tiny little imperfection has potentially thrown Martin Truex Jr.'s championship hopes out the window. He's not done. Let's not put a fork in him yet, but -7 points going into Bristol, a track he has historically not performed that well at. The regular season champion, many people's championship favorite, is on the ropes just 2 weeks in. I hope Truex has a strong run at Bristol next week. Hey, it's the last great Coliseum. Issues could befall any one of our playoff contenders, and that could vault Martin Truex Jr. back into the top 12 in points. But moving on, Truex wasn't the only playoff driver to run into trouble today, but we'll look at the playoff grid in just a few moments. I want to bounce around a bit. Let's now cut to the finish. Denny Hamlin was cruising in the closing laps, looking like he was going to sweep this year's Kansas races, when, playoff driver Chris Buescher has a right rear flat. NASCAR had to throw the caution. He was really slow up in the outside lane. They waited as long as they could. I think NASCAR was right to throw the caution. That sets up one final cycle of pit stops and then overtime. Daniel Suarez, with like 30 laps on his tires, stayed out. I think it worked out for him because I think he still finished 15th, which is about where he was running. But that was a risky play. Then Eric Jones, who had top 5 speed most of this race. Joey Logano, a playoff driver who'd run outside the top 10 all day. They took 2 tires. Denny Hamlin and Tyler Reddick on 4 fresh tires restarted in the 3rd row. And that's where this race was decided. On the restart, Tyler Reddick on the inside got a great jump, was helping push the cars in front of him, while Denny Hamlin just froze, it seemed, just did not go. He admitted after the race that, he was watching Kyle Larson in his mirror, how far Larson was laying back. If you look, Hamlin's laying way back as well. A lot of those guys on tires were laying back, typical restart games, but Hamlin let his focus drift too closely towards Larson. He lost sight of the cars in front of him and was slow to hit the gas. And that's where this race was decided. Once Reddick got clear of Hamlin and he was able to work through the slower cars on his own, it was over. In 2 laps, there was no chance Denny Hamlin was going to pass Tyler Reddick on equal tires. Denny Hamlin had to settle for second. Tyler Reddick, who finished runner-up at Darlington 1 week ago. He goes one position better, gets the win, his second win of the season. I had to double check, but this is only Reddick's second oval win in the Cup Series. Last year, 2 of his wins came on road courses, and obviously earlier this year at COTA, that was a road course. So a rare oval win for Tyler Reddick. 2311 has obviously dominated at Kansas the past 2 seasons. Reddick was my pick coming into this race if you watched our live stream last Wednesday. I'm not surprised Reddick was fast, but I am a bit surprised how fast the 45 team has looked these first 2 playoff races. I had Reddick getting through to the round of 8, but right now I'm starting to look at Reddick a little differently. I'm trying not to be held prisoner of the moment or anything, but all year, that 45 car has been really quick, just maybe a tick off from Larson or Byron or Truex at times, but at least in that conversation, they've just made more mistakes, done things to take themselves out of contention. But these first 2 playoff races, they've been able to stay out of their way for the most part. They caught a break at Darlington when, Reddick mashed the brakes in the middle of the racing groove and got rear-ended by Ryan Newman. But aside from that, the last 2 weeks, the 45 car has been able to finish more or less where they've run. That's a recipe for success in the playoffs. Again, I expected Tyler Reddick to do well at Kansas. I'll be curious to see if this speed carries over into the round of 12. Reddick won Texas last fall, so great chance he backs up his performance there. I'm certainly higher on Tyler Reddick now than I was a few weeks ago, but looking at some of these other top finishers, Denny Hamlin showing more championship 4 speed. If not for that late race caution, he wins this race easily, but because we got overtime, we're talking about his mistake on that final restart. Hamlin's in a great points position. We'll look at it in a moment. Erik Jones, that 43 car has come to life the second half of this season, which shocks me. They were never a key Chevy partner, but earlier this year, they announced their impending switch to Toyota. They're not getting any help from Chevrolet right now, yet Erik Jones was top 10 last week at Darlington, backs that up with a top 5 today. He was running top 5 before they employed that aggressive 2-tire strategy, so he didn't fluke his way into this finish. They ran there almost this entire race. So well done, Erik Jones. That jumped out at me. Kyle Larson had a roller coaster of a day. He finishes 4th, which is quite the recovery considering they lost almost all their track position about 2/3 into this race. Kyle Larson won the opening stage. That's an extra playoff point for him he'll be able to use in the next round. But late in stage 2 on a restart, he was racing middle of 3 wide. Blaney had gotten a run on the high side. Chastain was looking low. And it looked to me like Ross Chastain got a little loose, slid up the track, and maybe ever so slightly grazed Larson's left rear because immediately after Chastain wiggled, Larson started to wiggle. Both Chastain and Larson fell way back, lost a bunch of positions. And then because a bunch of cars behind them had actually just pit for fresh or at least scuffed tires, Larson and Chastain continued to lose track position until the end of stage 2. Larson, I think, fell all the way back to 19th. Looked like his race was all but over, but credit to Cliff Daniels. Middle of stage 3, Larson had worked his way back up to 13th, pretty respectable, but while under caution, Cliff Daniels called Larson to pit road. Decided to gamble to put on one of their final sets of 4 fresh tires. Larson restarted around 28th place, but got the long green flag run he was looking for and used those slightly fresher tires to pass all the way up to like 10th. Then during the final cycle of green flag pit stops with like 54 laps to go, he was able to gain a couple more spots. I think he was running 6th, 7th, or 8th when the final caution for Chris Buescher happened. I think that was his final set of 4 tires he was able to put on, got a good restart, finishes 4th. So, points don't really matter for Kyle Larson right now, at least not until the next round, but still a great day. Once again, that team showing why they're championship favorites. I had them in the championship 4, and at this point I see no reason to change that pick. Joey Logano. How on earth did Joey Logano and Paul Wolfe manage a top 5? They were off once again. I have not loved the Penske speed these first 2 races, certainly not from Logano. Actually, Ryan Blaney these first 2 races has looked like the best Penske Ford, but Logano was on track to finish like 15th before that final caution. They opted to pit and take only 2 tires. They gained like 10, 12 positions on track. And Logano's a great restarter. Despite being on old tires, he managed to hang on for a top 5 finish and gained several hugely important points. Before the final caution, when Logano was running outside the top 10, NBC's points monitor in real time was showing him +1, +2 over Martin Truex for the final playoff spot. But because of the lucky caution and then Paul Wolfe's bold strategy and Logano's fantastic restart, I think they're now plus 12. Gained like 10, 11 points on the cut line in the final 2 laps of this race. Wow. Chase Elliott not in the running for the Drivers' Championship, but the 9 car is in the Owners' Playoff, so a really great race for Elliott. This may have been his strongest performance of the season. He led 47 laps, which has to be a season high. Let me double check. Yeah, he more than doubled his season total for laps led today alone. So honestly, a great race for Chase Elliott. Good again for the 9 car in the Owners' Playoffs. Kyle Busch also had a great restart at the end there to finish inside the top 10. He once again had to start dead last for the second week in a row. This team has been unable to avoid issues on Saturday. Yesterday, got into the wall, had a tire issue in practice. They had to repair the car, weren't able to set a lap in qualifying. Started 35th, slowly but surely worked his way into the top 20, top 15, but that's about where he stalled out. I don't think Kyle Busch truly had top 10 or top 8 speed. And I've kind of said that same thing about Kyle 2 weeks in a row. At Darlington last week, it was the same story. He got up into the top 15, kind of stalled out. I think he had like a 10th to 12th place car, and that's about where he finished last week. This week, because of the late race restart, was able to get a couple extra positions, finish 7th, salvage what points he can. At some point, these issues on Saturday, if they continue, they're going to bite Kyle Busch. You can't start last in the round of 12, the round of 8, miss out on those early stage points and expect to advance. Hopefully, these Saturday struggles are a round of 16 issue only, and Kyle Busch and the 8 team get it figured out going forward. Christopher Bell, 8th. Man, I have a lot to say about everyone on this list. Christopher Bell's new and improved pit crew, they have to be sabotaging him on purpose at this point. To their credit, they actually performed a good pit stop at the very end. I think he went in 10th, came off 10th, but had fresher tires than some of the guys in front of him, was able to drive to an 8th place finish. So the final stop of the day, the money stop, they did pretty well. But just about every other pit stop today, the 20 car was losing positions, despite having the number 1 best pit box on pit road. Inexcusable. You can't keep making these mistakes, certainly not in the playoffs, and expect to make a deep run. This team, again, was Ty Gibbs's pit crew all season long. They won the pit crew challenge at North Wilkesboro. They were the 3rd ranked pit crew during the regular season. Joe Gibbs moved them from the 54 to the 20, and they've lost whatever magic they had. Hopefully they find it again, because for Christopher Bell's sake, he's going to need at least neutral pit stops. He just can't go to pit road and lose every time. He just hold serve on pit road. That's all he needs. If he can do that, I think Christopher Bell and that 20 car is fast enough to at least make it to the round of 12, maybe even further. Brad Keselowski, RFK, another solid day today. Keselowski led some laps, gets a top 10. Alex Bowman, sort of a quiet race, but he gets a top 10, not in the playoffs, but a solid run. Kevin Harvick made some noise at times. Second week in a row, he looked like a top 5 threat, finishes 11th. Ryan Blaney ends up 12th. Again, he's probably been the best running Penske for these first 2 races, but again, today, Logano, they took advantage of that final restart and had a better finish. Chastain, 13th. William Byron, 15th. They were no-shows today. I don't know if they had a mechanical issue or something they were fighting, but Byron barely sniffed the top 10 all day. Came into the playoffs tied for the number 1 seed with Truex, and we already talked about Martin Truex Jr.'s struggles this first round, but William Byron was way off his game today. He's got a huge points cushion, thankfully, but they can't have many more races like today and expect to go far. One final driver I want to talk about, and then actually, why not? Let's flip this around and look at the points for finally. Martin Truex Jr. is the first driver out, but right behind him, minus 19, is Bubba Wallace. I think the award for greatest missed opportunity today has to go to that number 23 team. Bubba Wallace obviously won this race 1 year ago when he himself was not in the drivers' playoffs, had very high expectations today, and early on was showing out. Drove up into the top 5, drove up to second, looked to be about the only guy in the field who had anything for Kyle Larson. But early in stage 2, while running in second place, Bubba Wallace had a right rear tire fall apart on him. He had just started to complain about how loose his car had suddenly got. He ended up wiping out into the fence, had some significant damage. They had to repair a right rear toe link. Bubba wound up losing 5 laps while the team made all of these repairs, and you just can't come back from that. So Bubba Wallace finishes outside the top 30, did collect 9 points in the opening stage, but that's not going to do much to mend the points damage. You can see he entered today only 1 point out, really confident going to one of his best tracks. He exits Kansas minus 19, going to Bristol. You could argue one of his worst tracks. I looked at his career stats, and I know he wasn't always in top equipment, but he has 1 career top 10 finish at Bristol. disappointing, no doubt about it. But if you look at these points, going into the playoffs, I had McDowell, Stenhouse, and Bubba out in the first round, as well as Blaney. 3 of my 4 predictions are looking pretty good at this point. Ryan Blaney, though, I mentioned him a moment ago, he's impressed me with the pure speed that 12 car has shown these first 2 weeks. So his point situation's looking a lot better. Kevin Harvick entered Kansas 2 points out. He's now 7 points to the good. Christopher Bell was only 1 point to the good, but he had a solid top 10 run today, overcame the issues on pit road to extend his cushion. Chris Buescher was going to be plus 20 or 30 to the good until he had his late race tire failure. So, he's still in an okay spot, but only plus 13. Luckily for him, Bristol was really nice to RFK 1 year ago, to Chris Buescher in particular. Honestly, I'm not used to the round of 16 being this close. Like, obviously, Larson and Reddick are locked in. Denny Hamlin and I'd even say William Byron are virtually locked into the next round. Technically, they're not. I think you need to be like plus 56 or 57 to officially be locked in, but plus 40 or more, they're okay. But even Brad Keselowski at plus 33, we saw what happened to Martin Truex Jr. today. He entered this race plus 25, exits minus 7. That's a 32-point swing. That tells me Brad Keselowski's not safe. Neither is Ryan Blaney. Anyone else on this list? Chastain. 1 race to go in the round of 16. And I think there are still 12 drivers who need to keep at least an eye in their rearview mirror. Should be great drama this upcoming Saturday night, the Bristol night race. Oh, I cannot wait. McDowell, Stenhouse just have not had consistent speed these first 2 races. McDowell especially has been very disappointing. They're going to need a Hail Mary. They're going to need something great to happen to them next week. Stenhouse has had some good Bristol runs in the past, but I don't know if you can count on those guys. Bubba Wallace, Martin Truex Jr., these other guys, Harvick, Logano, Bell, right around that cut line will be really interesting to watch. But there's a look at the points with just 1 race to go in this first round. Before we put the race on the Groovy Gauge, a couple other details I wanted to note. Carson Hocevar making his 2nd Cup start in a row, just his 3rd Cup Series start ever. Another top 20. He finishes 20th. It wasn't clean and pristine this time around. He did slide up the track and force Harrison Burton into the wall and end his day, so that wasn't good. But you heard on the broadcast, Dale Jr., I think, mentioned that Hocevar more than likely will skip the Xfinity Series to go Cup racing full-time next year. That supports the recent rumors that have been swirling around Hocevar and Spire, particularly that 77. Don't know for sure. Colleague Racing has been teasing a big announcement. That could be a wild card. We'll have to wait and see. And one final driver worth mentioning is Sheldon Creed, who made his debut today, driving for Live Fast in the 78. I'm not sure if they had any help from RCR, but he finished 29th. Kept his nose clean, stayed out of trouble. Not too bad. But now, real quick, let's put this race on the Groovy Gauge. 2 pretty good races to start the playoffs. Nothing crazy. I will say this race ended with a 3-wide pass for the lead as they took the white. That was pretty thrilling. But before that, with Larson losing all of his track position, Denny Hamlin had effectively taken control of this race. The Truex drama early on, then Bubba Wallace in stage 2 were interesting, kept me engaged. Decent race overall. Had a fun finish, an exciting finish, some strategy. I'm going to go 72%, like a slight half step below Darlington last week, but a good race. 72 is a very good score. 72 for me. Let me know what you thought of today's race down in the comment section below. But I think that's going to do it. Again, the focus of these playoff race recaps obviously are the points, mistakes, big moments on track, and I think we've covered all there is to cover in this episode so far. Thanks for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Be sure to hit that subscribe button down below if you're new to the channel and you love NASCAR. We review every single race. We react to the latest news, rumors, and more during the week. And as always, a big thank you to my Patreon supporters for your continued support. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, folks. I will see you again later this week. Take care, y'all.